here. And I'll tell you, for both these players, played each other a lot. One thing, Danny has had Jim's number on the Open Series here as of late.
And this is part of what's really fun to watch and cover about the Players' Championship is so many of these players play together and have made efforts to qualify together. There's no way to avoid high-stakes matches even early on in the day. Tom and Todd had a big match earlier on that Todd was able to get for his 3-0 inside of the Legacy Group play. And now these two very good friends travel to all the events together, and now a lot of their tournament rests on the outcome of this match as well.
All right, well, we enter the match here in Game 2. Jim Davis with Sultai Delver up 1-0. Now, this is a matchup where traditionally Sultai Delver has a lot of play.
So there's two things going on in most of the Delver matchups. There's who has the more powerful spells, and Sultai Delver, I think, is the more powerful of the two. And then the other side of it is who can play a more mana-efficient game, because there's so many Wastelands and Stifles floating around that sometimes it's just who can function better with one land in play. Timur Delver does that a lot better than Sultai Delver. So Danny's goal in the matchup is to keep the resources as tight as possible, keep the mana as tight as possible, and leverage being able to play better off of one mana. For Jim, once he gets to 2 lands and can start casting his spells, that's a big step in the battle.
All right, so we had this game, Danny starting off with a forked bolt on Jim's turn 1 Delver. Now both players were covering. It was Jim first with a Ponder, but now Danny second attempting to resolve a Brainstorm. And looks like that'll happen. Jim's going to take the window to crack his fetch land to avoid getting stifled.
Yeah, at least if Danny has a stifle there, it forces Danny to crack his fetch land before resolving the Brainstorm, making the Brainstorm a lot less powerful. And you see that Danny did pick up a stifle off of his Brainstorm, so very nicely timed there by Jim.
Yeah, actually Jim's deck on 3 stifles as well this weekend. That's not something you always see out of Sultai Delver.
No, it's pretty rare. I mean, this deck is not in the same ballpark for mana denial as Timur Delver, which is trying to make the game as much about playing off of 0, 1, and 2 lands as possible. But it's not unheard of.
So see where Danny wants to go from this. You mentioned picked up a stifle. We see both Delver, Wasteland, Ponder all in Danny's hand. He's definitely set up for that tight mana game you're talking about. With an uncracked fetch land. Could complete the Brainstorm. It'll be a Wasteland from Jessup. So maybe a bit of a bind. Jim fetching to not get stifled. He might get Wastelanded instead.
Well, there was no way to prevent that. I mean, the Tropical Island's in play, so Wasteland could not be avoided, but he made his efforts to avoid stifle.
Danny deciding what land he wants to turn off. It looks like he will go for the Tropical Island. And now there's a check to see if Jim has perhaps a stifle of his own. Looks like 2 Brainstorms, a Force, a Tarmogoyf, and a Disfigure. So contemplating a Brainstorm in response. And he'll let it resolve. So Tropical Island hits the bin. Danny passes the turn.
Jim also just wanted to maybe make a showing of stifle of his own there, pretending like he was deciding between, do I want to save my Tropical Island or do I want to save this to try to tag your Scalding Tarn?
Sure. Straw for the turn was Murderous Cut. 4 cards in the graveyard makes that a 1-mana play.
It's surprising to me how long it took for 1 copy of Murderous Cut to start showing up in Legacy deck lists. It's just a freebie.
Well, we're starting to see so many cards with the delve mechanic. You know, we've seen Gurmag Angler already today. A couple bannings over the last year have been delve cards.
Turns out when you have fetch lands and Brainstorms and Ponders floating around in a bunch of decks, the delve cards are likely to be really important.
Yeah, once they can discount all the way down to 1, they're pretty efficient. A Brainstorm here from Jim.
Looks like he's brought in and drawn a sideboard copy of Divert.
That's a 1 of out of his sideboard. Kind of that gets you even lower to the ground in those counterspell wars. Plays a second land. Right now he's on 2 Underground Seeds. He did actually have the replacement Tropical Island, but he's trying to protect it from additional LD for the moment.
Yep. He wants to be able to put the Tropical Island into play and cast something like Tarmogoyf all in one shot. He doesn't want to run the Tropical Island out there, have that get tagged by Wasteland, and then not be able to cast the green spells in his hand. In these kind of mirror matches, the place where I see people lose the most frequently is just messing up the land drops. Because These decks are so good at punishing people who expose their lands the wrong way. And once you get behind, it's really hard to catch up because you start getting clocked for increments of 3 or 4 and you can't cast the spells in your hand.
Danny, more lands to play here. He'll play Delver of Secrets and a Polluted Delta. So has the 1/1 in play, still leaves up mana. Jim does have a Disfigure at the ready, but he'd have to play it into open mana on Danny's side. Looks like that's acceptable. Jim's going to end step, go for the Delver. And it looks like Danny can counter this if he chooses to.
I don't know how much better this Daze is going to get. Jim on 2 lands already.
I mean, he'd hope to Daze something like a Tarmogoyf, but you're right, it's not looking very likely.
It seems tough to me when, you had to basically be banking on stifling a land to be able to do that. I know that, from Danny's position, he feels it's probably unlikely that this Delver is going to survive for very long if Jim was willing to tap out to try to disfigure it. But I think this Daze is running out of a shelf life, and it's just got to kind of cash in.
Well, Danny's going to cash it in indeed on the Disfigure. So Disfigure's countered, Delver lives, at least for 1 more turn, as we go back over to Jim. Draw was another copy of Tarmogoyf. And that will be the play for the turn. So we have Tarmogoyf in play. Instant sorcery and land in the graveyard, so it is up to a 3/4 already. Creature, actually. So we have all 4.
We have a Delver, a Fork Bolt, a variety of instants, and a variety of lands. So we got a 4/5.
That'll be Jim's play. Plan for the turn was a Tropical Island. Still has Brainstorm up.
Also has Divert up.
Do you think he loses value here because Danny gets to see the deck list and knows that Divert's in the deck?
A card like Divert, you're definitely hoping to catch people off guard. But there's a question of even if Jim brought it in here. It's not like there's a whole lot of things to be diverting in the matchup. But again, the decks run so resource light, especially when they're battling against one another, that if you do hit something, it's awesome. If Jim could try to move the game in such a way where he diverts the Submerge, that's going to be lights out.
That's great.
Unclear if he can do that.
Delver of Secrets is going to flip into the Insectile Aberration thanks to a Force of Will on top of Danny's deck. Then it will crash in for 3 damage, putting Jim Davis down to 15. So Delver versus Tarmogoyf is the race we have here. That's going to be a close one. Right now, Jim has him by a turn. So we go back over to Jim Davis's side. Waiting in Danny's hand, we have Stifle, Lightning Bolt, among others. Jim's side, multiple Brainstorms, that Divert you were mentioning. Force of Will. No removal as of yet for Insectile Aberration, though.
And not really all that much removal on the list. He does get to board into a little bit more with Murderous Cut and a copy of Go for the Throat. But his deck is only 3 copies of Abrupt Decay and 2 Disfigures, so it's not like he has a whole lot of creature removal. He has a lot of cantrips, obviously. He has a lot of draws to them, but he's not flushed with creature removal.
Right. He does have that. You're right. He does have that Murderous Cut left in his hand.
Yep.
But rather than cantrip into another land drop, Jim is just going to pass the turn. And I think now we're going to hold on the upkeep, and Jim's going to make a move on Insectile Aberration. And that'll be it. Murderous Cut is the play, going after the 3/2. If Danny's going to defend it, he's going to have to use his own turn's mana to do so.
And the soft counter spells, of course, aren't doing anything here with Jim having 2 mana up. So it's got to be Force of Will if he wants to interact here. And the Force of Wills are a precious commodity. And using them to protect a creature when the damage race is not really that far in your favor, the game looks like it's going to go on for a long time, that's a big cost. But then the question becomes, what else are you doing with the Stifle? Probably very little. Same play with the Daze the last time. What else is really going on with this card? The Daze was running out of a shelf life. The Stifle doesn't look like it's going to really pair up with anything at this point. So I like using the Force of Will here.
Yeah, I agree. Right here we see for the second time, Danny uses a counter spell to protect his Delver from removal spells. Force of Will pitching Daze. Danny takes a point of damage, so the game evens up at 15.
Something that's an interesting dynamic in this kind of matchup is that Jim can be a lot more aggressive trying to protect his Tarmogoyf because Danny does not have a clean answer for it. It's riskier for Danny to run that play because Jim can simply Abrupt Decay at a moment's notice, but Danny really struggles to get a creature this large off of the table.
Yeah, Tarmogoyf certainly is just backbreaking here. Now, a big counterfight there. Jim actually forces back on Danny's Jessup's Force of Will. He pitches a Brainstorm to it and wins the counter war. So Murderous Cut resolves on the Delver. And we're back to Jim. Looks like he is taking the lead on creatures.
And Danny's sitting on that Submerge. I think what Danny would like to do with the Submerge is either hope that at some point Jim puts a fetch line into play and shuffles. He can then Submerge in response and have Jim shuffle away the Tarmogoyf. Or if he finds a Wasteland, he can Submerge the Tarmogoyf back on top of the deck, Wasteland the Tropical Island, and then hopefully Jim can't recast Tarmogoyf. As it stands, though, he's going to take some hits. There's no risk of him getting burned out because Jim's on Sultai instead of Temur, but that's what he's trying to do with the Submerge.
Delver of Secrets, the play for Jessup. Has a replacement one, but this one will have to flip, and now he's down on life points. 11 on Danny's side to Jim's 14.
Yeah, this is no big cause for concern right now because of where the life totals are at. Jim does not have to force a response here to this Delver of Secrets because it's 14-11 his favor, and he's the one with the initiative right now. He's the one with the first attack with the Tarmogoyf.
Now, on the other side of things, Danny does have 5 points of burn hiding in his hand.
Though this is potentially where where the divert will come up.
Oh, wow. It could get to that. It'll be a Ponder from Jim. Danny trying to figure out when he needs to cash in that Submerge. And for Jim, we see a Flooded Strand, an Abrupt Decay, and a Deathrite Shaman.
A great assortment of cards here. A removal spell for the Delver, another threat card in Deathrite Shaman. Be surprised to see Jim shuffle this one away.
And this is where you mentioned that Sultai Delver it is a slightly stronger collection of cards. So the longer these games go, once both players get 3 lands or 4 lands, he said things do start to favor Jim.
Yes. And he's better equipped to win the Tarmogoyf battle because he has Abrupt Decay and some removal spells like Murderous Cut and Go for the Throat in the sideboard, whereas Danny has to make something happen with Lightning Bolts and Fork Bolts. A lot harder to do.
Tarmogoyf swings in. That'll knock Danny down to 7. He has 2 hits left. And Jim's follow-up is going to be the Deathrite Shaman he pondered into. So, looks like he will pass. He has still 1 mana up. A lot of things to do with it. He has Brainstorm. Still has that Divert you were talking about. And Delver of Secrets is going to flip off of Stifle. Now, does Danny actually want to draw Stifle is the question.
I'd be surprised if he takes this draw. Stifle doesn't look like it's really paired up with anything right now. Best case scenario is a Deathrite Shaman activation.
So it gains 2 life?
Yeah, I think Danny's far enough behind that he needs to do better than that.
Comes to that conclusion as well. He fetches away before he has to draw the card. And it'll be for a Tropical Island. So a mystery draw coming up for Danny. Now, he still has a lot of points of burn in his hand, so there's a chance he can steal it. But between Tarmogoyf and Deathrite Shaman, he is looking at lethal next turn.
With Submerge and two burn spells in hand, this would be an okay position for Danny if the life totals weren't where they're at right now.
A swing from the Insectile Aberration puts Jim down to 11. Now, how about a draw of Nimble Mongoose, though, for the turn for Danny?
It does allow him to create... he needs to get in a position where he's creating something proactively with the Submerge. He can't really just play defense for 1 turn, given how far behind he is right now.
Forked Bolt will take care of Deathrite Shaman. Now, here's Nimble Mongoose. A 3/3 Shroud, thanks to his Threshold.
Although, if Danny is intending on using the Submerge this turn,
this is really going to be bad.
The divert from Jim might be too much to overcome.
Yeah, he only has 1 mana up. In the meantime, Jim drawing a copy of Abrupt Decay. He'll swing with Tarmogoyf. Does Danny go to 2? Does he use the Submerge?
I mean, every play that Danny has taken so far suggests that he's holding off for a better spot. trying to either get a fetch land or wait to draw a wasteland. He may not feel comfortable going to 2 here. If he goes for the submerge, he's probably beat. And
right, Jim will divert it. It'll submerge the Insectile Aberration. Then Danny will be looking at lethal, and he'll know his top card. And
Yep.
There'll be no outs.
But are you willing to fall to 2 here?
Well, Sultai Delver does not play Lightning Bolts. He's going to go for it, though. Figures he needs to hit a home run to get out of the game. He goes for Submerge. Jim just making sure that he can divert this. He'll read through it quickly.
Yeah, the only thing it's just, is it free or not, but it's a targeted spell.
And there's the play. Divert, so. This card doesn't always hit, but when it does, boy, is it a good one.
And I think that if Danny, I don't know if Danny necessarily thought that the divert was going to be coming in, but if he was going to use the submerge when Jim moved to combat, he probably would have been better served doing it straight away. I suppose he wanted to take 2 turns off the Tarmogoyf, make him redraw it and so forth, but this was a high-risk play, and Danny has caught the bad side of it.
So Danny unable to pay 2. What that means is that the target of Submerged can be changed to Insectile Aberration. So it's going to go on top of Danny's deck.
And I don't feel like Danny can really afford to redraw an Insectile Aberration at this point.
Not sure what he can afford to draw. He's going to fetch his land first, so it looks like that means he will end up redrawing Insectile Aberration.
There's nothing better than a good divert. It's just it's the sweetest plum. It is just so great.
It's so backbreaking.
Got one in a Team Pro Tour on a Repel way back in the day, which is basically
that's really good. Yeah,
just Submerge. It's just a Submerge. Feels so good.
And the chump blocks. Nimble Mongoose will jump in front of Tarmogoyf. Now we know it's not a straight chump block, or at least Danny hopes it isn't. He'll try to finish off Tarmogoyf with a Lightning Bolt, and Jim is at the ready with a Spell Pierce.
And now Jim with Abrupt Decay left over to answer Tarmogoyf off the top. He's showing it. Danny's, I think, drawing to 0 outs at this point.
Well, he's drawing the Delver. He'll pass. Jim does not have him dead yet, but it's looking like it. Abrupt Decay on the Delver. Tarmogoyf will put Danny down to 1. He's on his last draw here. And Lightning Bolt won't do it, so Jim Davis with the win. He makes it into day 2 here. He one-ups his performance from last year, and now he's going to be battling Modern, looking for a bye tomorrow.
And Jim Davis was another player who got off to a pretty rocky start there at 0-2. Danny was 2-0, took a loss to Caleb Scherer in the last round of the Legacy Group play.